I'm 31 years old, a paramedic in Detroit. I've seen things that would keep most people awake at night. But this was something I still can't explain. It was around 2 a.m. when the call came in. A DOA case, a woman found stabbed in an alley behind a bar. Police were already on the scene, waiting for us to pick up the body. Standard procedure. When we arrived, the alley was soaked in blood. The victim lay in a crumpled heap against the dumpster, her body pale and lifeless. Multiple stab wounds, deep and vicious. Someone had been angry. I checked for any signs of life out of instinct, but she was gone. The police had no leads, no witnesses, nothing but a bloodbath and a Jane Doe. We secured the body on the gurney, covering her with a sheet. My partner, James, helped me load her into the ambulance. He was quiet the whole time. I didn't blame him. Something about the scene felt wrong. Like we weren't supposed to be there. The ride to the morgue was silent, except for the occasional crackle of the radio. James kept glancing at the covered body, shifting uncomfortably. "She looks familiar," he mumbled. I didn't respond. I didn't want to think about that. We reached the morgue and rolled the gurney inside. The coroner, an older man named Dr. Ellis, was waiting for us, but when we pulled back the sheet, he frowned. "This isn't her." I laughed nervously. "What do you mean?" "This is the body from the alley." Dr. Ellis shook his head. "No, the victim from that scene was already brought in. Hours ago." My stomach dropped. "That's impossible. We just picked her up." Dr. Ellis turned his computer screen towards us. The record showed the real Jane Doe had been checked in at 12:30 a.m., over an hour before we even got the call. James and I exchanged looks. This had to be a mistake, a mix-up. Maybe the police called another unit, and we weren't told. But then we checked the security footage. My heart pounded as the video played. The timestamp was from when we arrived at the alley. We watched as James and I walked to the gurney, but my blood turned ice cold, because at the moment I loaded the body, the gurney was empty. There was nothing there. James staggered back. No, that's not right. We put her in there. We saw her, but the footage didn't lie. We had rolled an empty gurney into the ambulance. We had driven it to the morgue. We had unloaded nothing onto the slab, and yet I had seen her, touched her cold skin, counted every stab wound. I turned to the gurney, my breath coming in short gasps. The sheet still lay draped over it. My fingers trembled as I pulled it back. Nothing. The body was gone. I haven't worked a night shift since. My name is John. I'm 27, and I recently moved into a small apartment complex just outside of Seattle. It was nothing fancy, just a simple one-bedroom place, but it was my first apartment on my own, and I was excited about it. The neighborhood was quiet, and the rent was cheap, which was all I really needed at the time. But from the very first night, something felt off. Every night, I'd hear these strange noises coming from the apartment above mine. It wasn't just normal footsteps or muffled voices like you'd expect in an apartment building. No, this was different. I'd hear what sounded like furniture being dragged across the floor, loud thuds, and sometimes what I could only describe as crying. It was faint, but once you heard it, you couldn't unhear it. At first, I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was probably just the tenants moving in or redecorating, but the noises kept happening. Every single night, like clockwork. The dragging, the occasional crash, and those disturbing, muffled cries. It wasn't just random noise. It was like someone, or something, was trapped up there. After about a week of sleepless nights, I mentioned it to the landlord. I told him about the noises, the crying, the sounds of furniture being moved. He brushed it off, saying the tenants upstairs were an older man and his son, and that they probably just had a lot of stuff to move around. He didn't seem too concerned, so I let it go. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. One night, the noises were worse than ever. I could hear heavy footsteps pacing back and forth, followed by loud banging. It sounded like someone was slamming into the walls. My heart was racing, and I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to know what was going on. I walked upstairs and knocked on the door. A man in his 60s answered. He looked startled to see me, but quickly put on a calm face. He was polite, even friendly, but there was something about his eyes that made me uneasy. I'd asked him if everything was okay, mentioned the noise, and he just smiled and said they were rearranging furniture. His calmness didn't match the chaos I'd been hearing, but I didn't push it. I just nodded and left. A few days later, I came home from work to find police cars and an ambulance outside the building. The police had raided the apartment above mine. They found a hidden room behind a wall in the bedroom, and inside, a woman was being held captive. She had been reported missing weeks ago. I couldn't believe it. The sounds I had been hearing, the crying, the pleading, the thuds, it was her. She had been there the whole time, just a few feet above me, trapped and desperate, and I hadn't done anything. I felt sick. I never stayed in that apartment again. I packed up my things and left within a week. I couldn't shake the feeling of guilt, wondering if I could have done more. Every creak, every little sound in the night haunts me now, reminding me of the nights I spent lying in bed, pretending those awful noises were just furniture being moved. I still think about that woman, wondering how long she was up there, waiting for someone to help her. It's a sound I'll never forget, and it's a mistake I'll always regret.